Welcome everyone to the William Andrews Clark Memorial Library, to those present in person, and welcome to our YouTube viewers as well. My name is Bronwyn Wilson, and I'm the director of UCLA's Clark and the Center for 17th and 18th Century Studies. A couple of housekeeping notes. In case of an emergency, please take a moment to identify the nearest exit, this side, one at the back as well. Restrooms are on either side of the building through the reading rooms. There is also an accessible restroom in the pavilion, which is outside to the north. Some of you will have noticed that the passageway toward that restroom is still blocked with warning tape, caution tape, following an episode with a broken pipe. But that restroom can be accessed from the north side. So on that remediation detail of the grounds, a personal anecdote. When I was interviewed in 2020, before becoming the director, I don't recall questions about my expertise with special collections, but I do remember being asked about my experience with architectural challenges, leaks, and working with trades. I soon learned that such experience would be useful. More importantly, I have learned so much from my colleagues whose knowledge and care of this extraordinary historic site and its landscape have been exemplary. I am grateful to them for their thoughtful stewardship and to the whole team who have helped organize today's event. So please join me in thanking the librarians and staff with whom it is such a joy to work. Another pleasure of being a part of the Clark Center is getting to know so many of our supporters, and we're grateful to see so many of you here today. One of those supporters is Lee Walcott, and it is a special pleasure to honor Lee with this inaugural Ahmanson Lecture in Clark Library Legacies. I'm delighted to invite the Dean of Humanities, Alexandra Stern, to the podium to thank Lee.
Good afternoon. First, thank you to Derek for that fabulous tour of the grounds. Learned so much, always a new stone to turn over, so to speak. You don't quite know what you'll find underneath. It will be interesting or challenging, as you mentioned, Bronwyn. Thank you, Bronwyn, Professor Wilson, Director of the Clark and the Center for 17th and 18th Century Studies, for opening up this afternoon's lecture. My job here is to welcome you on behalf of the Division of Humanities. It's delightful to see you here. And also, with great pleasure, to make a tribute to Lee Walcott, who is with us this afternoon. I'm really pleased to be here for this inaugural Ahmanson Lecture at the Clark Library. And we are very pleased, on behalf of the Division of Humanities, the Center, and the Clark, to dedicate this special event to Lee Walcott, Managing Director Emeritus of the Ahmanson Foundation. Let's give Lee a round of applause and recognize him. Bravo, bravo. Lee has been a steadfast and longtime supporter of the Center and Clark, and the impact of his vision and leadership on this important cultural center has been profound on students, scholars, faculty, and the broader Los Angeles community. You're really in for a treat with today's lecture, which will investigate how preservation and innovation can coexist to sustain California's cultural landscapes in a changing climate. This is a fitting topic to honor Lee's longtime sustaining influence. And Lee participates in the Faculty Advisory Committee. In fact, we've been in a number of meetings together, and I've always enjoyed his comments and presence and always learned from him. He also participates in the Chamber Music Committee for the Center and the Clark. And you have been involved, now I'm looking at you, Lee, at the Chamber Music at the Clark series since its inception in 1994. So really there from the beginning. So let's give you another round of applause, thinking of the wonderful chamber music that many of you have heard in this very room. Lee's work with the foundation dates back to 1987 and it continues to this day. So we're so grateful to Lee. Thank you for your partnership. Thank you for your generous support. And with that, I'll hand it back to Professor Wilson to introduce this afternoon's inaugural Ahmanson Lecture.
So thank you, Alex, so much, and also for your support of the Clarkin Center. We're really grateful that you could join us today. The plan for the next part of the events is that first I'm going to introduce Tracy Wolk, who's the first speaker. There will be a second speaker. I'll introduce her before her talk, and then we'll have a pause. Lee's going to make some comments, and then we'll have questions and answers. So just to give you a sense of the format. It's really such a special pleasure to be able to introduce Tracy Wolk, who we kind of met fortuitously via Stephanie Landregan, who will also be speaking. And this was somebody who was interested in becoming involved in this site and thinking about what we might be able to do with the landscape. As a part of her work, as she'll explain, as a part of her capstone project. And this has just been inspiring for us. I think it was a couple of years ago that we first met, and it's such, it's great to be able to share some of her ideas for the site with you today. So Tracy is a creative landscape designer specializing in urban infill and residential developments. A deep passion for placement drives her work in landscape design, creating spaces that offer beauty, function, and a sense of calm in our fast-paced world. She is especially drawn to projects that transform overlooked or underused areas into welcoming, people-centered environments. As a freelance landscape designer, she brings a strong understanding of California's diverse ecosystems and a sensitivity to the nuances of urban infill. Tracy is committed to sustainable, thoughtful design that supports civic life and reflects the unique character of each site. So, Tracy.
Hi. Thank you for having me here today at the Clark Library and the Ahmanson Foundation. So my name is Tracy Wolk. I am a landscape designer, and this lecture grows directly out of my capstone. While I was getting a landscape architecture certificate at UCLA Extension, I was also getting a historic preservation certificate at Boston Architectural College. And when I was considering what my capstone would be, I was looking for something that would marry the two. That's what I was looking for. And I lucked out because Stephanie Landregan, who is now retired, but she was the head of the landscape architecture program, was able to connect me with the Clark Library. And so what you're going to hear today is based off of that. Okay. And bear with me, I'm not a public speaker, so this is this lecture is not an exercise in So tonight I want to examine a proposition. Historic landscapes in Los Angeles cannot be sustained through static protection alone. They must be understood as living systems, operating under climatic, ecological, and urban pressures their designers never foresaw. I mean, the world has changed. And the Clark Library Garden offers a focused case study. And this lecture is not an exercise in nostalgia. We are here because William Andrews Clark Jr.'s philanthropy and long-term vision, but the subject before us is structure, documentation, and responsibility. So here's the Clark. As we know it, probably taken by satellite on not a good day because it's very scorched. But I want to point out a couple of things that I'm going to be talking about tonight. This is the gatehouse. It's the oldest extant structure at UCLA. The North Range, which was built in the 90s. This whole portion, the lawn, this area, was all designed, oh gosh, hold on. Oh my goodness, how do I get back? Oh no, I'm so sorry. From when? It's still going. On the computer.
I think it's maybe just leaning on this. It's,
I'm so sorry. Okay.
Don't worry.
Okay, so the upper portion was designed by Ralph Cornell, And the lower portion where the parking lot is was where the house stood. And it was built in 1905, and Clark bought it in 1910, and it was a 15-room house. And the lawn right in front of it was initially designed by Wilbur D. Cook, who master planned Beverly Hills. And before the library existed, there was a tea room and a pergola, and that was designed by Mark Daniels. And then the library happened, and the rest is history. But there's two things I want to point out because I'm going to talk about them later. Up in this upper corner, I have designed or have a concept for a theme garden, and when I talk about it, I want you to know where it is. And I'm going to talk about some historic trees, and I want you to know where they are. So down here, are two very rare Agathis robusta, and you cannot see them at all on the property because they're hidden by some trees planted in 1971, but they're significant, and I'm going to bring them up later. And then the Morton baked fig right there, which is original to the property. And finally, there is a palm right here, and that is also original to the property. So before the library even existed, they were here, okay? All right. So, today I will move through this in three parts. First, why this matters now. The environmental and cultural pressures acting on historic landscapes in Los Angeles. Second, what the Clark reveals, how this garden took shape and how it was altered and where its integrity is stressed. And third, what stewardship requires, how preservation can operate as a disciplined adaptation rather than a static protection. So why does this matter now? Heat, water scarcity, canopy loss, fire. Los Angeles is operating under compounding environmental stress. Historic landscapes were not designed for prolonged drought cycles, extended heat events, or contemporary irrigation constraints. These forces affect biological viability, not only appearance, and we see it here. Preservation cannot ignore ecological reality. This is a living legacy. Historic landscapes are not relics. They are living systems composed of soils, plant communities, hydrology, and maintenance regimes. If stewardship is intelligent, these landscapes can model adaptation without severing cultural memory. The operative question becomes, what defines integrity when living systems change? Did you know Clark wanted a public garden, and it was part of his will? So in his letter to the University of California, William Andrews Clark expressed his wish that the grounds remain open to the public as a garden. And that intention is civic. And the garden was conceived not as private ornament, but a public cultural space. Intent becomes the first measure of integrity. West Adams emerged between 1880 and 1925 as Los Angeles' first affluent suburb. Developed along the Pacific Electric Railway, it embodies city beautiful principles, wide boulevards, architectural ambition, and garden estates. Restrictive covenants shaped its early demographics. Subsequent redlining, freeway construction, and demographic shifts reshaped the neighborhood again. The Clark Library is designated Los Angeles Cultural Historic Monument number 28 and is one of 70 monuments within West Adams. The garden is not an isolated artifact. It is part of a historically layered urban fabric. So William Andrews Clark Jr., he was the founder of the Los Angeles Philharmonic, a supporter of the Hollywood Bowl, and he began collecting antiquarian books in the mid-1910s. And concern over the fire vulnerability led him to commission architect Robert T. Farquhar in 1923 to design a fireproof Beaux-Arts library. Construction began in 1924 and was completed in 1926. And Clark bequeathed the library the contents and the garden to the University of California in 1926. And when he passed away in 1934, the university assumed full control. The garden was integral to this gift. So the garden before the library. My archival research involved pulling building and demolition permits, reviewing Sanborn fire maps, analyzing historic photographs, and consulting an oral history of Ralph D. Cornell. And there's considerable confusion online about who designed what portions of the garden, but the timeline clarifies authorship. Wilbur D. Cook established the West Lawn and the observatory. So Robert G. Farquhar and Mark Daniels worked together to establish a Beaux-Arts order, which is axis, symmetry, and formality. And these are instruments of spatial control. The axis establishes direction and priority, and symmetry stabilizes composition. Formality regulates proportion and sequence in the garden. Movement is choreographed. Views are framed. Primary spaces are distinguished from secondary ones. The house and the library were placed in deliberate conversation along a central line, and the lawn operated as a connective field. Hedges and plant masses created enclosure. This is Ralph Cornell in 30s, going to Hawaii. So very early in his career, Ralph Cornell was the consulting landscape architect for UCLA, and he started in 1937 and stopped when he passed away in 1972. And what he did, what he was brought in to finish the northern end of the garden, there was nothing there. So he reinforced the central axis, clarified its termination by adding a wall at the end of this lawn on the east wall, a fountain that was never plumbed, but nevertheless it was meant to be a fountain. He completed the assembly area, which I'll talk about later, formalizing the garden's northern extent. And his plan at the time represented the most cohesive version of the property. There was actually a pedestrian entrance that ran along this line that was lost when the North Range was made. So what is a cultural landscape? A garden like the Clark is not accidental. It was intentionally designed. Its layout, structure, and plantings reflect cultural values, ideas about beauty, order, and public life. And this sort of designation that it is a designed cultural landscape, it carries obligations. So how the garden took shape. So as I said earlier, Clark buys the home in 1910. It was built in 1905. Another family owned it. And then in 1916, Wilbur Cook was brought on, and he designed the lawn and the observatory, which was torn down in the 50s by UCLA. And in 1920, Clark's relationship with Mark Daniels began, and he built a tea house and a pergola. And then in 1926, the library was built. And the garden evolved incrementally within a strengthening formal framework, and this is layered intentionality. So how the garden was altered. So Cornell completes the garden, and in 71, after the Cimarron earthquake, UCLA tears down the house, and that severs forever that Beaux-Arts connection, the conversation that the house and the library had with each other. 1990, the North Range was added, and by 2026, scale is exceeding maintenance capacity. Okay, I want to talk a little about these pictures. As you can see, here is the East Lawn in 1930, and then I guess I'll use the pointer. So East Lawn in 1930, East Lawn in 2026. One of the things I want to point out is that in the 1930s, these hedges are all used, and they are not climate adapted. At some point, they died. In 1971, these brush cherries, which are doing phenomenally well, were added. And then in 1940, this is an image of Cornell's wall, and this is it today. And one of the things I want to point out is that if you look at the 1940 image, look how low the hedges are, and there's a little understory planting. And today, they've grown, and they're just sort of encroaching on the garden. physical structure may persist while experiential conditions change. The East Lawn remains, the Cornell Wall remains, yet perception differs. Mature trees alter enclosure, maintenance affects clarity, plant massing shifts hierarchy, integrity is not static. So where is integrity stressed? Non-working fountains. The fountain in the front, I think it technically works, but it doesn't recirculate, so it can't be used. So, and compacted soils, soil is compacted when there's not a lot of weeds. Flood-prone courtyards, and at-risk tree canopy, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that later. These are systemic stress indicators, and preservation must respond to an underlying condition. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the historic trees here. This is the Agathis robusta. There's actually 2 of them. There's only one other recorded one in Los Angeles. So there are 3 in all of Los Angeles, and 2 of them are on this site. And these are original to the property. So that's kind of exciting. I think that's exciting. And then the Morton Bay fig. So the historic Morton Bay fig and Agathis robusta represent living heritage, and large canopy trees define scale and enclosure, and as they age, stewardship becomes technical rather than ornamental, and tree preservation is infrastructure management. So taking care of these beautiful trees. Okay, so the tension. Plant communities will change, and historic trees will age and decline, and environmental performance must improve. What defines integrity? This was the central research question of my capstone. Integrity is not the preservation of every element. It is the preservation of historic character, spatial order, hierarchy, proportion. If those character-defining relationships remain legible, the systems beneath them may evolve. And this aligns with the Secretary of the Interior standards for the treatments of historic properties, which prioritizes retention of historic character while permitting compatible alteration to ensure continued use. The question is not whether change is allowed, it is where change can occur without compromising structural integrity. The following proposals test those distinctions. So, adaptive strategy. Systems change, order remains, but stormwater capture, permeable paving, soil restoration, increased planting diversity, these adjustments operate beneath spatial logic and preserve it. So, beneath the lawn, consider Cornell's Great Lawn. The question is not whether the lawn is defensible. The question is whether it can perform responsibly in this climate. The intervention operates below grade. Runoff, so I'm suggesting a cistern under the lawn, but runoff is retained on site. Subsurface storage reduces potable demand, and you can actually harvest air conditioning condensate, so there's huge coolers here, and all of that can be harvested and retained and used to water the property. So the hierarchy remains intact, the bones, but the performance improves. So this is part of my capstone, my recommendation for, which was kind of fantastical. I was proposing getting rid of the parking lot and putting in a garden. I don't think anybody's going to be doing that, but I am going to give you a couple examples of what are realistic. So at the scale of the site, recalibration clarifies circulation and entry, and my proposed entry sequence reinforced the procession. But non-contributing areas are reconsidered to support ecological function, and the plan does not impose novelty, it clarifies order. Okay, so the North Range courtyard, which currently have an oak in each, and both oaks are infested with shot-hole borer and oak beetle infestation. I had an arborist come to the property and walk through it, and he estimates that the trees only have about a decade to live. And because they're non-contributing, I am recommending that it has more flexibility for intervention. So because it lacks primary character-defining features, adaptation here does not compromise the historic framework. Paving is reduced, planters are introduced, planting shifts towards a softer register, native trees and grasses add seasonal depth, and performance improves without burdening the historic core. So this is the area that I pointed out that I said, later on I'm going to show you a garden. When I met with the library, one of the things they talked about is they give away seeds. They have seed packets when you come. And they were really interested in a themed garden. And so named for John Dryden, poet, I created for them a themed garden. So the enclosure and axial alignment are preserved, but planting references and plants refer to the 17th and 18th century botanical and literary texts central to the library's archives. And the garden becomes both spatial room and curatorial extension. Selections are calibrated for climate and irrigation efficiency. It's not a reconstruct of the past, but a garden structured by history and viable present conditions. One of the things I want to talk about is those that went on the garden tour, we peeked in and saw this gazebo. This gazebo was designed by Mark Daniels, and it is hidden. It is, it's on this side of the lawn. You have to go duck into a path, and then there it is. And part of my capstone was recommending that it was moved and made the central feature of the themed garden. So this is the assembly area. It was conceived by Ralph D. Cornell as an earthwork amphitheater, and the planted stage has long lost its climatic viability, and actually it lost its backdrop a long time ago. They were used. And the bowl now primarily reads as a terminus of the lawn rather than a legible theater. And my proposal reestablishes sharpening the earthwork contours and restoring the spatial clarity, adding climate-adapted hedging, and replaces the former use. Native grasses define the slope, and the form is clarified through contour, and the planting will evolve, and it becomes a space for gathering. Finally, preservation is not resistance to change. It is a disciplined adaptation. In a volatile climate, inaction is not neutral. It allows decline. The responsibility is to identify historic character, protect spatial order, and recalibrate the systems that sustain it. This garden exists because of William Andrew Clark's Jr. philanthropy and his vision, not only for the rare book collection, but of a public garden intended to adore. His gift establishes both a physical framework and a long-term obligation of care. Stewardship of a landscape like this is ongoing. It requires research, technical rigor, institutional commitment to be sustained over time. And the question is not whether we intervene, it is whether we do so with precision and responsibility for this gorgeous legacy. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. That was terrific. So as a follow-up, the next speaker is Stephanie Landregan. She is the director of Altadena Green, working to save, and I'm just going to say that when I was trying to track her down for this, it was like she was in Greece somewhere, so I thought there was something like great about retirement. But now she's back as the director of Altadena Green, working to save trees in Altadena after the Eaton fire. For over 17 years, she was the director of the Landscape Architecture Program and Horticulture Program at UCLA Extension. She managed 60 adjunct instructors, reviewed, wrote, and implemented curriculum, and taught at UCLA Extension for over 25 years. She has worked as a chief landscape architect for the Mountains Recreation and Conservation Authority, as well as she is a licensed landscape architect in California. And her designs include inner city parks, wilderness trails and trailheads, soccer fields, ball fields, equestrian facilities, residences from estates to small, intimate gardens. And she continues to consult throughout California. Stephanie, please.
Good afternoon. It's lovely to be here. I'll figure this out. So in a world of design, especially in landscape architecture, the concept of genius of place refers to the practice of identifying and enhancing the natural characteristics of a site rather than imposing a foreign design upon it. So we look at respecting the land, and a designer looks at the existing topography, the flora, the light, to create something that feels like it belongs there. We reference Frederick Law Olmsted as the father of landscape architecture. This was his theory. He believed that every plot of land had a special character, and his goal for these projects, including Central Park, was to bring out that genius to provide psychological escape for city dwellers. And that is very context appropriate here. Romanesque, Egyptian, Moroccan, Spanish architecture all are based upon the Mediterranean climate. And that climate is very special, both artistically and floristically. The Mediterranean climates cover only 2% of the world. These Mediterranean climates are characterized by hot, dry summers and mild, wet, very wet recently, winters. And they exist in 5 distinct small regions covering only 2% of Earth's land. Primarily locations include the Mediterranean Basin, which is Southern Europe and North Africa, coastal California, coastal central Chile, western and southern Cape of South Africa, and southwestern Australia. The amazing thing about this climate is that 90% of the diversity of plant life is in this area, of this 2%. That's where we see an amazing experience of plants, and we exchange them across these areas all the time. So our climate is also perfect one other thing, for gardens, for courtyards, and being and using the outdoors. So in the Mediterranean cultures, not only did they share this, but they shared site planning, which often reflected the climatic conditions, taking advantage of prevailing winds, solar orientation, topographic vistas, seasonal rains. And that is the thing that led us to the shared site element, the garden. It was integral to building design, the courtyard, and to social life. Due to the heat of the Mediterranean climate, courtyards provided relief from the summer sun and a controlled environment with fountains spraying mist and splashing, soothing sounds, often with sustenance within them, such as fruit trees, figs, dates, grapevines, and flowers to attract pollinators. This setting is the Alhambra, which is an example, which I think is an exquisite example and was fortunate enough to see also with Greece, that when you have an understanding of the site, it is going to be developed over and over. The original site was not, it was a Roman fortress, and then it was taken over by Islam and the Moors, and it is then the Catholics, and then it came back and it's preserved. It was partially destroyed in 1812 because of war. So what's famous about this is that when we look at the Mediterranean environment, we have protected cities, fortified, and then inside we have people who live who were mostly royalty. But on the outside, what's very cool is the reason that we have a lot of our agriculture outside is because a lot of the agriculture was wind pollinated. which is kind of interesting. All the olive groves are wind pollinated. So they're not going to be inside, and you would not want them in your courtyards. So, but famous is the Moorish influence called the Gardens of Paradise. The magnificent Alhambra is so amazing because, well, first of all, there's so many steps and so many hills. You have to be in shape. But when the Islamic folks either colonized or took through war any of the sites, they always wanted a place that had water because irrigation was really essential, drinking water was essential, and ritual purification was also there. Bathing is important. It's part of the spiritual practice. So these are some of the elements that are always necessary whenever you would see an Islamic community. It's hard to say. During the wars, they just changed, correct? We're seeing that now. The enclosed courtyard is very important in social life. It creates a reflective sound. It allows for amplification of sound. And so you would want even a small fountain can be very effective. You want activity of that fountain. You want to have grapes covering the walls. Little known is that many of these Mediterranean remnant walled cities, the capers grow in the stones. They don't need a lot of water, but they take the moisture that is from the surrounding area to thrive. So there's a lot of interesting ways that these areas provided sustenance for those who were there. And the reason you had interior courtyards and plantings was because of wildlife, and it protected many of your specimens. Now, even early on in the Moorish area, there was a lot of horticultural exploration and collecting, and so your special specimens would be inside in the courtyards, so they were protected. This is sort of the prequel, it's sort of like that, the prequel to Star Wars. This is the prequel to here. But the other needs of courtyards were sometimes to provide meditative rest, ritual. And so if size mattered, if you have a very small courtyard and you want to do a palm court or a cypress court, it would keep any of the coolness in, so you could create different environments. It was really essential because we live on air conditioning here. I mean, I only put it in 7 years ago because I was in denial because I'm in Southern California, but I've gotten over that. But I tell you, the courtyards in my Four Oaks keep me quite comfortable. But we want to create space, indoor rooms, but they also need to fill the comfort level for us. So throughout history, gardens and houses have existed in a very symbiotic relationship, whether they've been private or they have been the realm of mostly of royalty. But they add mystery and interest and beauty, and they serve so many purposes that we still see today. So if we're going to look at the Mediterranean, did not exist in France, and they, of course, wanted to steal the ideas. So Lenotre wanted to make sure that also the French and the French royalty had beautiful gardens. But France is flat. So rather than totally copy the Mediterranean and the Renaissance gardens, instead of having outdoor spaces that you would lounge in, he created great vistas of outdoor spaces for you to see from inside the house. So they are sort of embroidered landscapes because before, the French used their royal yards for hunting and gathering, but now there was this expression of wealth and power that was evident in the gardens. So what Lenotre did, though, is he wanted to symbolize both wealth, order, symmetry, and control of nature. Because what you notice the wilderness is on the outside of controlled nature. And that was a clear distinction that he wanted to make. What he wanted was long vistas, hidden groves, and dramatic and dynamic focal points. It created a sense of order and tranquility of importance, and you were invited to walk through it and appreciate it. He also, I will tell you, didn't mind changing nature, and one of the things he changed was the Seine River, you will see right here, to be a much better controlled axis. It's not a wild river, and it didn't belong in his landscape. So the human control of nature was really important. Let's see, go this way. So now let's look at how we bring this whole sensibility of gardens and estates to the United States. And this was a 3-hour talk that I managed to make into 2. No, I'm kidding you all. 15 slides. So there's going to be some gaps here. But what is important is that when we brought over here to the Americas, our royalty were merchants, and our royalty were stewards of industry and stewards of the forest. And as we see, when you got to capitalistic royalty, the gardens became fashionable, and they provided status that did not go dated. You may have jewels, you might have a lovely outfit by Vanderbilts, but the truth of the matter is your gardens sustained the image of your wealth and your power. So, and as the states matured, much of the status took on forms from early plantations, and those were basically there for production. And then the estates became very, very important for entertaining, but basically for impressing. So the Biltmore was much more than a mansion. It was an estate, and it was also a place to showcase his collection of horticultural specimens. So you will see in many, many of the estates in the United States at the very early, exploration was going on, specimens were being brought back and forth, and almost every amazing estate had a conservatory. So, but what's interesting in the Biltmore is that Frederick Law Olmsted designed it. Now, when he designed this, the American sensibility was not the French, which was the embroidered landscape. However, many people wanted it. So how do you balance this? And that was what was amazing about this landscape. Is Olmsted took the landscape of what you would see the formal French garden in one area that showed it, but also an understanding of the landscape as something that you could walk through, a park-like. It became a pleasure ground as opposed to something that was embroidered. So the land was the theater for the building, especially when the buildings housed collections of artifacts. Some were horticultural specimens and some, of course, rare books. So let's talk about rare books. I was lucky to learn everything I'm going to tell you right now from a tour I took just a minute ago. So the William Andrews Clark Memorial Library is really an amazing site. One of the things I want to show you here is that Tracy talked about the amphitheater, but there's a ghost of the amphitheater you can see actually in this overhead aerial. When you look at it and you see what we have today and you hear about what we can have tomorrow and you see what there was before, and you see how that expression of both the present and the past, you realize that how do we bring our Mediterranean climate into this now? And that's one of the things that I really, Tracy, I got to help her with advising her. And so this is to tie in with her studies. And what we see today is that we have so much change going on in the climate. We have had what we call arcs, huge atmospheric rivers. That's what an arc is. It's an atmospheric river that is K for 10,000 years, the biggest rain in 10,000 years. So when you look at these things, and we have droughts where we are losing, huge 100-year-old trees, how are we going to start responding as a Mediterranean climate to live the lives that we live here because we love that climate, we love this environment, we're outdoor people. So we see this, that we need maintenance, water, and funding. So the remnants of this beautiful, I would say, landscape is based upon what we were able to afford. And as we look at it, we're going to have to make some hard decisions, and I see those decisions being actually helped by what Tracy studied. We have here fountains that do not recirculate. Well, we can easily fix that. We have beautiful vistas. We have the building that once looked at the home and nothing is there now. So how do we fix that focal point? We've seen that there were other landscape architects who came in and changed it. When you leave the library, you look at, and what if you have there the focal point? It's not going to be the building because it's gone, but we can maybe have an appropriate tree. How are we going to redesign this? And then we have more to look at. We have the legacy, large, mature trees. I'm working very hard in Altadena to save the trees that saved many homes in Altadena. Some of the large, mature trees served as ember catchers. And we know that our California oaks can live past several hundred years, and they are fire resistant. So what we need to do is cherish our mature trees. We are failing at that in this city. I see it. It's heartbreaking. And so what I do think is that as we look at these beautiful living legacies, how do we preserve them as well as our buildings? Here are some other elements that make this site so beautiful. The sounds of the fountains. As we walked around on our tour, we heard DWP fly over. We also heard Adams, which is right now probably even louder. So there are elements that we could reintroduce and turn back on that would soften the experience here. Because the magic of this site is here, and sometimes it's just a tiny little taste of it. And I think it's time that we look at how we can all work to make it come back into its grandeur. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Stephanie. So one of the ideas of this event was also to be thinking about the anniversary of the Clark, which is 1926, 26-27 is the anniversary of the building, and so we're hoping to launch in October it'll be an opportunity for us to really be thinking about moving forward with this. So we're really excited to be able to kind of plant some seeds for that process. But I now would like to invite Lee up just to say a few words, and then we'll move to some Q&A after that. Lee?
Thank you, Bronwyn, and good afternoon to everyone who's here. And I'm ever so grateful to be honored in light of the creation of this new Ahmanson Lecture series, particularly as it focuses on landscape and landscape needs here at the Clark. And if there could have been a better beginning, I think today's two lectures on just that issue of the landscape and its needs and its future potentials, were remarkably expressed in these two lectures that we just heard. I'd like to make a few remarks that aren't about landscape, but are about books. And I'm not sure, I think I can see enough to follow what I had written. In 1987, following 22 years as an educator, mostly spent at a prominent school for young women while developing a substantial curriculum in the visual arts and teaching, that I was asked by Robert Ahmanson, now deceased, if I would be interested in becoming the director of the Ahmanson Foundation. Needless to say, it was a tempting invitation, and I was ready for a new focus in my life, which would lead me for another 22 years. During the initial weeks in my new position, I felt it necessary to become acquainted with the Foundation's trustees in order to learn something of their backgrounds and what they saw as primary responsibilities for implementing the Foundation's mission. Such was not difficult with one particular trustee, who soon became my guide and also my mentor. I'm speaking of Franklin D. Murphy, former chancellor of UCLA, and then at that time, CEO of the Times Mirror Corporation. Franklin called me soon after I was in my new position and said that he would like for me to spend a day with him exploring the campus, the whole campus of UCLA. Enthusiastically, I said I would be delighted. We began. Sorry. We began in the Young Research Library on the lower level in special collections. It was here that he drew me to a room with many books produced by Aldus Manutius, one of the late 15th century printers to translate and publish works initially written by ancient Greek, Roman, and significant minds through his time. I found it very practical that his printed works were uniquely small so that the average person could carry a copy with them, as they were printed in either Latin or the Italian vernacular. This began my realization that one of Dr. Murphy's passions was books. And during the next 9 years as trustee, he and I managed to have a funding allocation at each board meeting to support the acquisition of Aldene's through the search efforts of special collections librarians. Today, thanks to Franklin and others, the Aldene collection at UCLA is one of the preeminent collections in the world. The next place that Dr. Murphy wanted to share with me was the Clark Library, close to downtown. This, on the interior, this marvelous Italianate building with a block-long wall surrounding acres of land, was as beautiful on the exterior as it was on the interior. And it housed a remarkable collection of 17th and 18th century books, available to scholars local and worldwide for study, including a collection of Oscar Wilde materials that are also preeminent. Once again, Franklin and I regularly supported acquisitions for these collections at Ahmanson board meetings, and they were continually approved. By now, I realized that Franklin was a vibrant, vivid, and future-looking bibliophile who had fostered the growth of two significantly important collections, both owned by UCLA. To me, this represents another kind of legacy, and it is to that term that I envision the newly established Ahmanson Lecture series to follow, with specialties regarding landscape as we experience today. I'm humbled by being honored for the establishment of this lecture series and sincerely thank Bronwyn for choosing me to be recognized. Thank you. I apologize for the hesitancy in my reading and the fact that I was hardly able to see what I was reading, but at any rate, I'm hopeful that I'm on a better course for improvement. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. I think it's also worth mentioning, and seeing Helen here makes me think of Helen Deutsch, who was the director before me, is that one of the things about Lee's involvement with the Clarkin Center isn't simply about funding. He's really, as Dean Alex mentioned, he participates in the faculty advisory committee meetings, but he's also an advisor to the director. We meet with him, he listens to what our concerns are, and I think it's something where there's so many levels in which you've contributed to this organization, and we all thank you immensely for that, for the insight. So for the final, we're going to have some time for Q&A. We maybe have 15 minutes for some questions, I think, from that stimulating pair of papers. And I just wanted to introduce Brian Brodersen, who's kindly agreed to be a kind of moderator, maybe intervene in some questions. He is now somebody with whom Tracy works, so it was terrific to have him come to the site and also potentially help us going forward. He's been practicing landscape architecture in Santa Barbara and Ventura County since 1999. He founded Brodersen Associates in 2009, the result of a desire to provide the highest level of design service to the area. Brodersen brings a unique approach to the design process, combining a strong artistic and design sense with an approach that includes client outcomes that are fulfilling for clients and communities, are sustainable and environmentally sustainable, as well as being innovative and timeless. So Brian is going to moderate the Q&A, and I'll walk around with thank you, with the microphone.
Great, and while she's doing that, yeah, we're here to understand a little bit more about the gardens and what can happen. My background, I'm sort of the practical guy in the room. I'm the guy who has been building gardens and saving gardens and changing gardens and renovating gardens throughout Southern California. It's not just in Ventura, but in Los Angeles, near San Francisco, all over California, really. And I'm from North Carolina originally. And I did teach college for 6 years, and I taught most of the people that work on the grounds at the Biltmore Estate, so I'm very familiar with that particular garden and that particular time period. Anyway, so let's have our first question.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to say, so I'm the head librarian here at the Clark. Big fan of Tracy, and I just want to acknowledge for those that went on the tour that like 95% of everything that I said on that tour actually comes from Tracy's research. So I just want to make that known, credit where credit's due. So, you know, it was enlightening for me because I've been here for about 10 months. So even though I was a student worker many, many years ago, my knowledge of the Clark and its grounds was a complete mystery until I read Tracy's capstone project. So I just want to say that. Second, I'm absolutely all about getting rid of the parking lot for a garden and restoring the quote-unquote axial symmetry. But my question for you is this: you did a lot of historic research, and I'm really curious, what were some of the surprises that you found there? I mean, just kind of mentioning that people had a vision in the past for the way that the Clark grounds could change, and then maybe also opening that up to everyone. It's like, how realistic could those things be?
I mean, one of the things that I didn't talk about that I didn't really get a chance to develop in my project was I really wanted to do a donor brick area, and that would be something that I think the library should really explore. I just wanted to throw that out there. It's not part of the question. What did I find surprising? I did find surprising how many people had conflicting timelines. Different literature said one thing, another literature said another thing, and it was resolved very easily by pulling all the permits. But the permits weren't, I think that the permits were not the physical address of the library, they were the physical address of each individual thing. The physical address of the reading room, the physical address of the observatory. And so it took a little digging to figure that out, and I actually was able to get the addresses by pulling Sanborn fire maps. I don't know if anybody in here is familiar with them, so a lot of historic preservationists. So they were very helpful, and I had to take a little trip downtown and get some help with the fire maps to figure out what was what.
We're just going to follow the microphone, I think.
Hello, thank you very much for those great talks. It's great. I have a little bit of a complicated identity in the room today. I am a former student of Mr. Wolcott's. I cannot possibly call him by his first name. I'm class of '83, Marlboro Scroll for Girls. AP Art History. I can safely say, as a preservation consultant and a neighbor and a community advocate, that I was not the best student, and I probably was a pain. But I can safely say that Mr. Wolcott changed my life, and I just wanted to say that. The worlds that he opened to me and the things that he invited me to learn remain with me today, so thank you for that. As I said, I'm also a neighbor and a preservation consultant, and I'm also a community advocate. So my question is, in the preservation consultant world, is what do you consider to be the periods of significance? And the reason I ask that is because my question is the North Range a significant development on the site? And I loved what you had to say about integrity, again, as a practitioner, and that on this site, the aspect of integrity, of intention, is so important. And so I have an invitation for those of you who are planning for the future, is returning to the intent of William Andrews Clark to make this site truly open to the public. And by that, could we restore the Ped Gate, which I don't think was original, but could we restore that Ped Gate to make it truly a place where the neighborhood comes to? Because as a community advocate, I can tell you that we are incredibly park poor, and we need places for people to be able to go. And of course, it's not the type of spot that anybody would play ball in, but certainly it could be open to the public as a place of quiet contemplation and inspiration. And I think that the community would really love that and welcome that. I've been here 25 years, and this is only the second time I've been here. So it is limited in its public openness.
I agree with you. That was a multi-part question. I'm happy to share my capstone project with you, my book, because it includes period plans. And I did not include, I mean, it does have when the North Range, but I would not consider that significant. I broke it down by, Cook, and then Daniels and Farquhar, and then Cornell, and I would say those are the most significant. Particularly, Cornell was sort of primary mostly because of his relationship with UCLA, and I was getting my certificate at UCLA, and so therefore that was kind of the theme. Another part of my capstone is the experience, the arrival experience, right? So when the North Range went in, there was an entry gate that was right on the axis, and that is gone, and now you walk up the driveway. I also should say I used to live, part of why I knew about here was because I lived on Fifth Avenue, so I used to walk my dog here. And you walk up the driveway, and it's sort of like a meh experience, and it can be so much more. And so, yes, that is something that should be for sure dealt with. Would be a pedestrian entrance that would be a little more inviting.
Yeah, moving forward, the goal is to enter a period of what we would call design development, to take the information that we have and then do a master plan for the improvements of the entire grounds with everything broken down into suggested phases. And then sort of bite by bite, some things can be improved. I know that there's some maintenance that has to occur. There's all sorts of just basic maintenance costs that are sort of may get in front of everything, but the goal is to have a sort of a long-range vision that can be followed and agreed upon.
So just before I go on to, or did you want to say something else, Tracy? No?
Nope.
Just before going on to the next question, I was just checking with my colleague, and we are open from 9 till 4:30, Monday till Friday. So it's true there's no pet door, and one of the things that actually Tracy and Stephanie and I remember we talked about was having an entrance that wasn't the front gate as well, that's something that would be terrific to go forward with. But please do let people know that it is open, and I think that that's something that's really important to everybody who works here. So I'll give it to the next.
Okay. Hi.
Hi.
Those pictures you had of the long ago and the present, and you pointed out the short hedge and now it's a tall hedge. Mm-hmm. There was no wall in 1940, was there?
The Cornell wall was in the 1940 image. Yeah, you just
the
can't
outer
really
wall?
See. Oh, the outer wall, like this, the brick wall?
Yeah.
Oh, the brick wall has been there forever. When Cornell bought the property, it was 3 contiguous lots, and the appeal of it for him was that it was walled in. And then as he bought parcel after parcel, Derek talked about it a little on the tour, but I don't think you were on it. He actually paid to, so some houses were demolished, and some houses he paid. Clark actually paid for them to move to other places. That's actually kind of like a long-range fantasy of mine, is to hunt down all the houses, because there are on the demolition permits moving where the houses moved to. So and then he just enclosed as he bought. The property became enclosed.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
The talks were wonderful, and it's just so exciting that now we're thinking about the future of this amazing place. And I guess first of all, that as an 18th century literature person, that phrase, the genius of the place, he wrote that. Alexander Pope, in his poems about landscape and about gardens, talked about the genius of the place. So I was really moved to think about the 18th century kind of reappearing in the history of American landscape design. And that's kind of where my question, it's just really a amusing that I have, because as you were pointing out, Tracy, like Mr. Clark was looking back to these earlier periods for some of his aesthetic ideas, and the library uses Inigo Jones and uses all these architectural details from the past. But you're honoring that, but also still thinking about a very different kind of future. So I was very excited about sort of how you maintain that balance. And I didn't hear most of the tour, but I always have wondered about the pergola in this regard, because I always showed people the pergola on the tours that I came up with. And it has that date on it, right? It says it's like 1627 or something like that.
On which?
The pergola.
The pergola, the existing, the
Yeah.
one that was.
The one that's over by the wall.
Oh, yeah.
It's pretending to be old.
That's so interesting.
So in a way, it's really kind of iconic for
That's so
what
LA.
the Clark is about. It's very LA. So there's so many kind of interesting ways to think about, that's one really cool way to think about the Clark being part of LA, is this kind of fake past that it, so I have one request for you, which is, I want to know if the piece of Pompeii is really a piece of Pompeii. Did you see that?
I don't know. You're going to have to show me after. Can you show me after?
Well, there's this hunk of marble with a mourning scene on it. That looks, it's supposed to have come from a sarcophagus that is supposed to have come from Pompeii.
Oh, wow.
And it's just leaning there in the outdoor reading rooms, just leaning on a wall.
How random.
And that seems very like the Clark to me.
Yes, I love it.
So I appreciate the balance, because I think it's very hard to strike.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was beautiful. Both your talks were amazing.
Hi there, thank you. Those were wonderful talks. I'm Professor Timothy Duran from Cal State LA. I'm a professor of ancient Greek and Roman history, and I've been coming to this place a few times. The only thing that I wanted to say is I think that we're living in an era in which there's an urge to democratize and an urge to open things up. But we've just learned that this place is technically open from 9-something to 4-something. And I would say we might want to double check our urge to democratize things, because I don't mean to sound like an elitist here, but to democratize can be to vulgarize. I don't think you want to see people coming in playing loud music on a radio. There's something special about having these kinds of semi-secret gardens and semi-secret places in a city like Los Angeles, which is so very democratized. My wife and I were just walking around today before the talk, and there are parks here. They're not huge, but there are 2 public parks that are kind of kitty corner to each other. I think there's something magical and wonderful to have a place like this that is technically open, but not maybe encouraging every single person in the world to come in. Having a little tucked away place, a little Narnia of our own, I think is rather special and beautiful and rather unusual.
I think the management is critical on a property like this, because at the same, I've had the same thoughts and the same questions about how will the property be used. It's a lovely garden and it has a lot of potential. And then how do we manage it? Because it's not the Biltmore estate where you pay for a ticket and you go in and there's people everywhere managing every inch of your experience there. Here, it's sort of free range at the moment. And so if it becomes a wonderful stroll garden, a wonderful place to be, what are the management pieces that are placed? And so that's something that we definitely would consider moving forward.
I do think one of the considerations of any garden is, and it's happening at the Huntington, there's a lot of rentals that occur. I worry when I go there, I have dear friends who are working at the garden about the collection, and I seriously worry the same way at Descanso Garden when I go and I see these magnificent flashy light events that bring in all sorts of folks to enjoy it, but I also believe that there does need to be secret gardens in Los Angeles. I think of the Virginia Robinson's Gardens. I don't know if you all know about it, but it's a terrific secret garden that you should, it's run by City of LA, Recreation and Parks, which is, pardon me?
She said county.
Oh, county? Is it? Oh, that's right, it is the county, because Tim was there. But what county always is, you'll know the difference. It's county parks and recreation and city recreation and parks. So there's a different focus. So, but I do agree that there needs to be places that are sort of, you discover them. They become your secret place. But I don't think that we want to get far away from being democratic in what we're doing.
I just want to comment that in a neighborhood like this where there's such a thing as shade equity, because of the freeway coming in, it was segregation by design. And as the neighborhood became hollowed out and poor, people weren't able to afford to maintain their trees. And this is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful area. And this site has gorgeous historic trees and shade that can provide respite for people. And it is only open when the library is open. That is still pretty limiting. So that's not Saturday and Sunday, it's Monday through Friday. And it is a secret garden. I was obsessed with the book, The Secret Garden as a child. And when I wandered in here, I was like, holy cow, I have entered it. And so it is, just the hours make it kind of exclusive in a way, but the allowing it that Clark wanted it open, that is going to be maintained because that was part of willing the property. But to have shade in a neighborhood that doesn't have, that has shade issues is magical. That's just my opinion.
Okay, so I have the mic now, and I don't know if I'm the last one, actually. I probably am. So I'm one of the riffraff who live in this neighborhood. And since you're referring to the Secret Garden in Narnia, I will move on to Tolkien and the Doriath, which you couldn't get in unless they let you, or Lothlorien, you couldn't get in unless they let you. That shouldn't be this situation. This is a community that has 4%, it's in the 4% percentile in all of LA for parks. It has, depending on which little pocket, 17% or less green coverage. Most of it is 10% or less. So having green space is actually very important. So my name is Laura Myers. That is Colleen over there who was talking, I think, earlier. Yes. Oh, she's hiding now. But she and I and others are working on a master green plan for this area. And awesome. One of the things we're looking at is not just where are our public parks, but where are our medians, where are our little side parks, where are our privately held open spaces and parks, and how do we create access to that? So I understand your point about secret gardens, but I'm not sure having a 5-acre secret garden in 2026 makes a lot of sense. So that's not a question.
So being in this position and seeing the dean's hand up, oh, okay. Well, all right, yeah, this will be the last, it'll be the last comment, but this is, I just want to say that I think that with the librarians, this is something that we've been really, we're really keen to find a way to be able to do this, particularly on the weekends. It's something of the staff and being able to maintain it and the finances for it. So this has been on our mind. I think that we're all really committed to that, and it's something that I'm really thrilled to be hearing all of the comments about this, because it helps us to be able to try and make a move that way. So, so this will be the last comment.
Don't put any pressure on me. My name's Catherine Camo. I live in Country Club Park on 3rd Avenue, so not too far from where you were. I bought a house there last year. I currently work at CSUN. Previously, I spent 15 years at the Getty and 8 years at Architectural Digest. And I can tell you, working at the Getty, that Mondays were blessed because nobody came. You know, we had it to ourselves. I mean, there's nothing like being in that Malibu garden with Mary and Drew sticking your toes in the water, you know? I mean, it was awesome. So I think one thing that the Getty does is you have to make a reservation. And I think that helps them control it a little bit because, I mean, I think it is important to have access, but also to have some sanctuary as well. And my CTA is, I need some work done to make my house HPOZ friendly and ADA friendly. So if anybody wants to give me a business card, I'd be thrilled.
That's a wonderful.
Can I say one thing?
Please do.
For 9 years, I was the chief landscape architect for the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy and the Mountains Recreation Conservation Authority. And one of my goals was to bring people into the wilderness and to have them go through a transition zone where they realize they were coming in to a sacred place of a whole different environment, that animals were king and that you did not have a heart attack and kill the rattlesnake in front of you. You backed away because it lived there. So there's, and the landscape architects who did a beautiful job on the Franklin D. Roosevelt, if you ever have a chance, memorial in Washington, D.C., there is a sequence of arriving that we could put here that changes your heart. It's like what you would do when you enter into sacred places. Your whole premise of where you are is refocused. And this is what landscape architects can do and will do. So when you come in, you have changed, you understand you're in a different place, you slow down, your breathing slows down, and all of a sudden you act differently. And that is easy to do. And we have done it if you go out to any of the Santa Monica Mountains, hopefully there are places where we have successfully done this. So we can share, but we can also help you come in to understanding the space and its sacredness. Because this is our closest thing to sacred landscapes. Mm-hmm. And I think that we can make it open to all.
So I'm going to take that as the thank you to you both for your talks and Brian for also joining us. Please join us for a reception in the North Range.
And I just also want to say, too, that we still have a great deal of material showing the documented history of the changed landscape at the Clark here in the North Book Room, photographic. And if we look at examples, gardens are actually one of our collection strengths in our rare book collection. So in the South Book Room, on the opposite side, we actually have a number of the garden features that our guests have actually spoken about, including, I believe, it was Pope's garden upon his death. So actually, they engraved a lot of the landscapes, the grottos, the ground of Pope's garden in one of the books over there. So happy to read those.
And thank you all for coming. And thank you, Lee, again.
Thank you for coming.